The first strange thing was that my boss was laughing, not smiling politely, not doing that controlled little half laugh she used in meetings when a client said something stupid but expensive, actually laughing, head tipped back, hand over her mouth, eyes bright in the low amber light of the hotel bar like she'd forgotten for one reckless second that she was the most composed woman in every room she walked into. That should have warned me the night was going somewhere unsafe. Her name was Vivian Hayes, and for the last 14 months, she had been my boss at a boutique branding firm in downtown Chicago. I was a senior copywriter. She was the creative director, sharp, elegant, impossible to impress, and so relentlessly put together that the rest of us had a private theory she ironed her thoughts before speaking them. Vivienne did not do messy. She did tailored blazers, impossible client saves, and the kind of eye contact that made grown men correct themselves mid-sentence. She ran presentations like military operations and somehow still remembered everyone's coffee order. She was also unfairly beautiful. Not in a loud way, in a dangerous one. Dark hair usually pinned back, precise clothes, calm voice. The kind of face that made people assume she was colder than she was, mostly because warmth that controlled is harder to read. I learned pretty early that underneath all that polish, she was funny in a dry, precise way and much kinder than she let the office notice. She stayed late to help interns fix work she could have delegated. She sent food to a junior designer's apartment when his mother got sick. When my father had surgery in March, she approved my time off in 12 seconds and then quietly had flowers sent to the hospital under the firm's name so I wouldn't know it was her. So, yes, I respected her. Too much, probably. That had made the attraction inconvenient from day one. I never did anything with it, obviously. I am not an idiot, and I am definitely not the kind of man who tries to turn ordinary professional closeness into some fantasy just because a woman is smart and beautiful in expensive shoes. So I kept it where it belonged. Private, managed, harmless, most of the time. That night was supposed to be harmless, too. We'd landed a major hospitality account after 6 brutal weeks of revisions, impossible timelines, and one client who used the phrase, "make it feel more like ambition, kissed by moonlight," with a straight face. The team went out after the signing dinner. Nothing wild. Just drinks at the same hotel where the client dinner ended. By 10:30, half the office had gone home. By 11, it was just 4 of us. By 11:40, it was just me and Vivienne because our account manager had left with her fiancé and our designer had gotten a text about a plumbing leak. I should have left too. Instead, Vivienne lifted her second martini, looked at me over the rim and said, "You can go, Owen. I promise not to give you extra points for stamina." I smiled. That's tragic. I was building my whole career on bar loyalty. That got the laugh. The real one. And that was how I ended up still sitting there 20 minutes later while my boss, my usually immaculate, impossible to rattle boss, got just drunk enough for her edges to soften. Not sloppy, not reckless, just looser, funnier, more honest. She slipped off her heels under the table and said, "Do you know what I hate most about big wins? The expectation that we have to enjoy them in public." She pointed at me. That, exactly that. Occupational hazard. No, she said, swirling the last of her drink. Occupational fraud. Everyone thinks success feels glamorous. Mostly, it feels like being too tired to enjoy your own dinner. I looked at her for a second. You should probably stop talking before I start thinking you're human. Vivian smiled into her glass. That would be disastrous for office morale. Then her phone buzzed on the bar. She glanced at it, and something in her face changed. Not dramatically. If you didn't know her, you might have missed it. But I did know her, at least enough to see the moment her mood dropped one clean floor. She turned the phone face down. "You okay?" I asked. "Perfectly." She signaled the bartender. "I'm making what I'm sure is a wise decision and ordering another." "No, you're not." She looked at me, not offended, just surprised. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, "Was that concern or insubordination?" "Efficient damage control." That sounded rehearsed. "That's because I work in branding." For a second, I thought she'd argue. Instead, she looked at the upside-down phone again and said quietly, "My ex is engaged." Ah, there it was. Somebody walking in through the one door you'd been carefully keeping shut. I'm sorry, I said. She gave one small shrug. It's not tragic. We've been over for almost 2 years. Then, after a beat, I just resent being informed by a social media push alert like a civilian. That made me laugh, and to my surprise, she laughed too. But it didn't really fix it. I could see that. The bartender brought water instead of another martini, God bless professionals, and Vivian drank half of it with the resignation of a woman who knew the room had turned against her. By midnight, the bar was closing. I stood and said, "Okay, I'm getting you home." Vivian stood too quickly, reached for the table, and muttered, "Oh, that's unfortunate. Can you walk?" "Yes," she said with dignity. Then she took one step, caught my arm, and added, "Probably not in a straight line." The valet area was worse. Cold wind, no cars available yet, ride shares surging because of a concert 2 blocks over. I had one hand lightly at her elbow while she leaned against a pillar and closed her eyes. "Do you want me to call someone?" I asked. "A friend? Your sister?" Vivian opened one eye. "My sister has 3 children under 6. If I wake her for this, she'll let me die on principle." "Okay, then you're building?" She shook her head immediately, a no. "No? The doorman knows too much already." Despite everything, I smiled. That seems vague. It's precise enough. I looked at her, at the heels in one hand, at the exhaustion under the polish, at the way the night had clearly gone from celebration to something she'd had to push through. My apartment was 6 minutes away. Her building, with late night traffic, was at least 25. And she was in no condition to do 25. So I said carefully, "My place is close. You can sleep it off on the couch, drink water, insult my decorating choices in the morning, and leave with dignity mostly intact." Vivian studied my face for a long second. Then she asked, quieter now, "Are you a safe person to be tired around, Owen?" That question landed deeper than it should have. "Yes," I said. She nodded once. "Okay." That was how I ended up walking into my apartment at 12:30 in the morning, with my drunk boss leaning lightly against my shoulder, her heels in my hand, and the growing certainty that absolutely nothing about this night was going to feel normal again. My apartment looked painfully ordinary compared to the kind of places I usually associated with Vivian. Not bad, just human. Warm lamplight, books on the coffee table, a navy couch that had survived 2 moves, one framed print I kept meaning to hang straight and never did. The kind of place that said competent adult with limited patience for decorative pillows. Vivian stepped inside, took one look around, and said, "You have plants." "I do." "They're alive." I hear that in a judgmental tone. "In an impressed one," she said, slipping off her coat. "You hide it well, but you may actually be domesticated." That felt like progress. I got her a glass of water, then another. She drank both while standing at my kitchen counter, one hand braced against the edge like she was negotiating with gravity. "You okay?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Then, after a beat, "No, but not in a dramatic way." I nodded. "That seems honest enough. I'm trying a bold new thing tonight." She looked down at the empty glass. "Apparently it's called telling the truth before midnight." "It's after midnight." "Then I'm excelling." I smiled despite myself. The smile stayed there when I pulled a folded blanket from the hall closet and set it on the couch. "You get the sofa," I said. "I'll take the chair or the floor like a gentleman in an old movie." Vivian looked at the couch, then at me. "That couch is too short for your dignity. My dignity is flexible." "That does not sound true." "It's not." That got a tired laugh out of her. Good. She needed soft edges right now, not more reasons to feel exposed. "Bathroom's down the hall," I said. "I can find you a t-shirt if you want to sleep in something more comfortable." Her brows lifted. "You keep women's emergency clothing on hand?" "No. I keep old college shirts and basic foresight. Suspiciously competent. I work for you." That made her look at me in a way that felt warmer than the room had any right to be. I grabbed the cleanest oversized gray t-shirt I owned and handed it to her. She took it, fingers brushing mine for half a second longer than necessary. Or maybe I imagined that part because it was after 1 in the morning and my boss was standing barefoot in my apartment holding my shirt. "Thank you," she said quietly. Then she disappeared down the hall. I used the next 2 minutes to place a bottle of water on the coffee table, dim the lights, and remind myself very firmly that this was a simple act of kindness and absolutely not the sort of situation where a man gets creative with meaning. When Vivian came back, my entire internal system failed anyway. The shirt hung soft and loose on her, long enough to hit mid-thigh, sleeves slightly too big. Her dark hair had come down from whatever precise style it had been in earlier, and now fell around her shoulders in a way that made her look less like my boss, and more like a woman who was finally too tired to keep performing being fine. She caught my expression and tilted her head. "What?" "Nothing. That was clearly something. I was deciding whether my t-shirt looks more expensive on you than it does on me." Her mouth curved. "It does." Rude. Accurate. She sat on the couch carefully, then leaned back and closed her eyes. For a second, I thought she was already asleep. Then she said, without opening them, "Can you sit down for a minute?" I hesitated only because I didn't trust my own pulse. Then I sat in the armchair angled beside the couch. Vivian opened one eye. "That is not what I meant." I looked at the empty cushion beside her. "That feels like a trap. It's 6 inches of couch, Owen, not a character test." "Debatable." She smiled faintly and shifted, making room. So I sat on the far edge of the couch, careful, upright, the physical embodiment of appropriate distance under complicated circumstances. Vivian watched me for a second and then laughed softly. "You are sitting like there's an HR representative in the room." "That's because there is. Spiritually." That is the least seductive sentence I've ever heard. I turned to her. I'm not aiming for seductive. The words came out lower than I intended. Her smile faded, not badly, just into something quieter. "I know," she said. That changed the air a little, not into danger, into honesty. She tucked one leg beneath her and rested her head against the back cushion. "I'm sorry about tonight." "For getting drunk?" "For being difficult in expensive shoes." "You weren't difficult." "No?" She looked at me, eyes heavy but clear enough now. "I'm in your apartment wearing your shirt because my ex got engaged and I reacted with the emotional maturity of a wounded Victorian." I let out a soft laugh. "That's harsh." "It's accurate." "No," I said. "It's tired." That stilled her. I kept my voice easy. "You had a long week, a big night, bad timing, one bruised ego. You're allowed one imperfect evening." Vivian looked at me for a long second. Then she said, very quietly, "You always do that." "Do what?" "Make things feel less humiliating than they did 5 minutes earlier." I didn't know what to say to that, so I went with the truth. "I don't think you have anything to be humiliated about." Her gaze stayed on mine, and for one strange, suspended second, the entire room seemed to wait. Then she leaned her head back again and murmured, "You're very dangerous when you're kind." "That seems unfair." "It is." A few minutes later, her breathing slowed. Not fully asleep yet, just drifting. Then, without opening her eyes, she said, "Stay until I fall asleep?" That question landed in the same place as the one outside the hotel. "Are you a safe person to be tired around?" "Yes," I said softly. "I can do that." So I stayed. I don't remember deciding to lean back, or when exhaustion from the week finally caught up to me too. I only remember the room going quieter, the lamp glowing low, rain starting somewhere against the windows, and the last thing I registered being Vivian's hand resting lightly against my forearm, like some part of her wanted to make sure I was still there. When I opened my eyes again, pale morning light was spilling across the apartment. Everything was warm. Too warm. For one confused second, I couldn't figure out why. Then I looked down. Vivian was asleep with her head on my chest, one arm draped lightly across my ribs. My blanket tangled around both of us on the couch like the night had quietly made a decision without consulting either one of us. And just as I was processing that, she stirred. Vivian stirred once, then went very still. not asleep still, realizing still. I felt the exact second she understood where she was, her head on my chest, my arms somehow curved around her, morning light across the couch, my blanket over both of us like the night had made several decisions without asking permission. She lifted her head slowly. For one brief, unguarded moment, she looked confused instead of composed. Then she looked at me and said, "Well," I smiled a little. "That seems fair." Vivian sat up carefully, one hand to her temple. Her hair was a mess, my t-shirt was wrinkled, and the expression on her face suggested she was trying to decide whether this counted as humiliation, intimacy, or a minor workplace crime. "I should apologize," she said. "For what?" She glanced at the couch, then at me. "Apparently using you as a human pillow." "That was mutual. I also fell asleep." She blinked once. "You are annoyingly good at removing drama from situations that are objectively dramatic." "I'm trying not to make this worse." That softened her. "Not much, just enough." She sat back, exhaled, and said, "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "I know." "No." She looked down at her hands. "I really didn't, I just—" Her mouth tightened faintly. "I haven't slept that hard near another person in a very long time." That landed differently than everything else. Not flirtatious, not light, just honest. I kept my voice even. "You were tired." "Yes," she said. Then she looked up at me. "But that wasn't the only reason." There it was again. The thing between us neither of us could pretend not to hear anymore. Before I could answer, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Vivian grabbed it, scanned the screen, and shut her eyes. "Of course." "Problem?" "Our account lead wants me on a call in 40 minutes. The hotel client changed their launch timeline overnight." I looked at the clock. "That feels aggressive for a Wednesday." "It's Thursday." I stared at her. "That's worse." That got an actual laugh, soft and surprised. "Good." The room needed it. Vivian stood, steadied herself on the arm of the couch, and looked toward the hallway. "I should leave. You should probably shower first." She looked down at my shirt. "In your apartment? You can use the bathroom. I have spare towels. I am deeply committed to not sending my boss into a client call looking like she survived a small emotional weather event." Her eyes held mine for a second. "You say that like you're not part of the weather event." "Probably true." She disappeared down the hall after that, and I used the next 10 minutes to make coffee, find a clean button-down that might fit under her coat, and remind myself that none of this was normal and I should maybe stop acting like every impossible moment with Vivienne was something I could simply organize into manageable drawers. When she came back out, hair damp, face scrubbed clean, still wearing my shirt, the problem got worse. Not because it was seductive, because it was too real, too unguarded. Too much like seeing the private version of someone who had spent more than a year never letting me this close. I handed her the coffee and the shirt. "This might fit better under your blazer." Vivian took both and looked at the shirt, then at me. "You keep being useful in ways that feel inconvenient." That seems like a harsh performance review. "It's not a review." Her voice dropped a little. "It's a warning." I didn't answer, mostly because I knew exactly what she meant. A few minutes later, she had changed, buttoned the borrowed shirt neatly, and stepped back into the living room with most of her armor restored. Not all of it. Enough. But before she reached for her coat, she stopped. "What?" I asked. Vivienne looked at the couch, then at me, then said, "I don't want this to become something we politely never mention." That hit hard, because it was exactly what I would have feared from anyone else, and exactly what I hadn't wanted from her. "It won't," I said. She studied my face like she was checking the depth of the promise. Then she nodded once. "Good." I walked her to the door. The apartment felt warmer than it had an hour ago and much less safe. At the threshold, Vivian slipped into her heels, straightened, and became almost fully herself again. The woman from the office. The one who could dismantle a bad strategy in 6 words and make a roomful of executives thank her for it. Almost. Because when she reached for the doorknob, she stopped and turned back to me. "I need to know something," she said. "Okay. If I did something reckless right now..." She held my gaze. Would you tell me it was a mistake because I was drunk? The room went completely quiet. I answered carefully because she deserved that. No. Vivian's expression changed, not relief. Something warmer than that, something far more dangerous. Then she took one step closer, close enough that the morning light caught in her eyes, and said very softly, "Good, because if I kiss you right now, it won't be because I was drunk." I looked at her for 1 second, maybe two, long enough to understand that this was the point where a worse version of me could ruin everything. He could get swept up in the moment. He could forget the reality of it. He could act like chemistry was the same thing as good judgment. So I didn't move right away. Instead, I said the most important thing first. "If you kiss me," I told her quietly, "I'm going to kiss you back, but I need to know we're not borrowing courage from last night and calling it clarity." Vivian held my gaze. Then, very softly, "I was wondering if you'd be the kind of man who made this easier or harder. And you're making it safer." A pause, which annoyingly makes it harder not to want. That nearly finished me. I let out a breath that was half laugh, half surrender. "Vivian." "I know," she said. "There's work. There's the office. There's the fact that I'm still your boss and not just a woman standing in your doorway wearing a very borrowed shirt and making questionable decisions before coffee." I looked at the shirt. "It's actually after coffee. That is not helping your case." Then her expression shifted again, quieter now. "I'm not asking for recklessness, Owen. I'm asking whether this is real when I'm sober enough to mean it." That was the only question that mattered, and the answer had been waiting on me longer than was professionally convenient. "Yes," I said. Her eyes searched mine like she needed to make sure I understood exactly what I was saying yes to. The complication, the timing, her, all of it. "I don't want a version of this that gets blamed on tequila," I continued, "and I don't want a version that makes your life harder. But if you're asking whether I want to kiss you because I want you," I stepped closer. "Yes, very much." That was it. Whatever careful distance the morning had been holding together finally gave way. Vivian touched my face first, one hand light against my jaw, almost like she was verifying I was real and not something her exhausted brain had invented. Then she kissed me. Not dramatically, not like a scene anyone had rehearsed. It felt more dangerous than that, because it felt certain, warm, steady, and a little stunned on both sides, like we'd each spent too long pretending this current wasn't already there, and now neither of us had the strength or interest to deny it anymore. When we pulled apart, she stayed close enough that I could feel her next breath. "Well," she said softly, "that does seem to be our word for this." A real smile touched her mouth. "You are infuriatingly calm." "I'm not calm. I'm just trying to behave like a person with frontal lobe function." "That's disappointingly attractive." I smiled and some of the tension eased. Not all of it. Because the truth was still waiting for us. Work. I said it first. "We should talk about the office." Vivian nodded immediately. "Yes." That alone told me I was not in this alone. She wasn't trying to drift into something messy and hope intelligence cleaned it up later. She was already where I was, wanting the feeling, but wanting the structure too. "I don't want you cornered," I said. "Not professionally, not personally." "You won't corner me." "I know, but I still don't want a situation where this becomes unfair to you." She was quiet for a second, then said, "There's an internal transfer opening in new business strategy next month. Same floor, different reporting line. I saw the email yesterday." I blinked. "You're very prepared for someone who just woke up on a copywriter." Vivian's smile turned dry again. "Preparation is how I survive having feelings." "Fair." I leaned against the doorframe. "And is this transfer something you already wanted?" "Yes," she said. Then, with complete honesty, "and this morning made me want to stop pretending I had no reason to take it." That settled it for me in the best possible way. Not impulsive, not reckless, real, and handled like adults. "So," I said, "we do this properly." "We do this properly," she echoed, "meaning no secrecy that turns us weird and guilty." No secrecy. No pretending this didn't happen. Absolutely not. And one actual date, I said. Soon, on purpose. Not involving crisis management, client dinners, or you falling asleep on my chest. Vivian tilted her head. You're ruling out one of your strongest advantages. I'm trying to show range. That got a laugh out of her, and the sound of it in my doorway at 8 in the morning felt wildly unfair in the best way. Then she straightened slightly and said, Dinner tomorrow? Tomorrow? She lifted one shoulder. I've already had one sleepless night this week. I don't see the benefit in adding another by waiting. I laughed. Dinner tomorrow. Good. She reached for the doorknob, then stopped once more and turned back. One more thing. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. Her expression softened. Thank you for last night. For the couch? For being exactly the person I hoped you were. That one landed deep. I didn't try to be clever with it. You can be tired around me anytime, I said. Her eyes changed at that, warmed, deepened, something. Then she gave me one last brief kiss, opened the door, and left. The date the next night was better precisely because neither of us tried to turn it into some grand, dramatic relaunch of our identities. We had dinner at a small Italian place in Lincoln Park. She wore a simple black dress. I wore a jacket she said made me look dangerously competent. We talked for 3 hours, laughed too much, and admitted that the attraction had been inconveniently alive for longer than either of us had wanted to inspect too closely. 2 weeks later, she formally requested the transfer. A month after that, it was approved. And the strangest part of all of it was how natural things felt once we stopped pretending the line between us had never been there. Vivian was still sharp, still impossible, still the most composed woman in most rooms, but now sometimes she'd show up at my apartment with takeout and no makeup, and fall asleep with her head on my chest on purpose, which I had to admit was even better when we were both awake enough to mean it. What would you have done if you brought your drunk boss home just to let her sleep it off, and then woke up with her head on your chest? And have you ever been through something like that, where one unexpected night changed the way you saw someone completely? Tell me your story in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.